My thoughts on the apply versus awkward beef. If you haven't seen it already, there's a 90-minute coaching session where Apply is coaching a former awkward student. And his coaching, basically, he realizes that this player is totally screwed up. They're basically playing with one hand tied behind their back. They have some set of rules that they're really strictly following. And Apply figures out that all of this came from a coaching session that student did with awkward. And I'll cut straight to it. Awkward is totally wrong in this scenario. Apply is right, but, and this but isn't that awkward was somewhat right, because awkward was completely wrong. The way that he coached this student really led to some problems. But Apply also missed out on some opportunities to explain to viewers that might be in a similar place, maybe Diamond or Platinum and above, that are really looking to accelerate their growth as a player. And Apply missed out on a couple of opportunities to explain exactly how you can apply these things and improve your game on a step-by-step basis. So I'll get right to my notes. One of the things that Awkward should have looked at the play of this particular player and mentioned is you need to make sure you always have a get out alive plan. And that is true. That's a viable, important thing to emphasize to players. But what Awkward said instead is never dash in unless you have a chance of getting the kill so that you can get the dash reset and then get out. But that's such a small box to put yourself in, and it takes away all of the adaptability, because sometimes you can dash in really safely and you know that either you've got deflect or you've got some way to get out alive that has nothing to do with whether you're going to get the kill and get a dash reset. So that's the first thing that I feel like Awkward really could have taken the chance to explain, but because he failed to do so, he put this player in a box and made their gameplay actually degraded. It got worse. The second thing that most players have is this issue where they're thinking damage, 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 and when they die, here I'll show you exactly what this looks like. So they're gonna jump in to we'll do this in a practice range to explain what I'm talking about here. So they're gonna jump into a game, and as soon as they die, they're gonna do this. They're going to be thinking damage, damage, damage. They're going to be shooting the enemy team. Oh no, they get killed. And as soon as they die, they're going to press tab. And the first thing they're looking at is this damage number. They're checking their damage number and then the enemy DPS. And they're saying, oh, I've got 2k more. I'm doing great. And then they just load in and they respawn and they continue the game the same mindless way that they started it. Or here's the other thing they do. They die and then they check damage and they see the enemy tracer has way more damage than they do. And that's where they're going to start to look at their supports. And they look at their support numbers and they're like, oh, well, my supports have less healing than the enemy team, so that's why it's a support diff. No, most likely the problem is actually that your supports have less healing because you're dying, sitting in spawn, looking at tab right now. But that's really, really common for players to do when they're looking to get this damage mindset. But what you need to understand is that damage is not all equal. And that's what Apply was really pointing out in this VOD, is he's saying, if a wrecking ball on your team goes in and slams the enemy team, you need damage right there, especially as a dive character like Genji. But as a soldier player too, when you see wrecking ball slam in, you want to capitalize on that one window of opportunity. You've got to be able to put in damage when your team is putting in damage, because that's how you get kills. And one kill is worth a whole lot more than 200, 400, even 600 more damage on your stats. So that's the first thing that I feel like players really need to understand out of the Apply review or VOD review that he did for this student. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that Apply made this rule. He said, good coaches never make rules for their players. And I find that kind of hilarious because that is its own rule. But good coaches often make rules because it's easy for dumb players to follow. And that's what Rank Up Academy is all about. It's making rules that are easy to follow. You kind of have a 4-step plan or an easy checklist that tells you what to do to rank up. And that can help for dumb players or players that are really just looking for an easy solution to turn their brain off and keep improving. But good players are careful not to make hyper rigid, broadly applying rules because they restrict your mental adaptability and problem solving. And I have seen that countless times. It's like with the Genji scenario. If you make yourself a rule where you can only dash in if you're going to get the kill, that is really easy to follow, but it's going to screw up your gameplay. On the other hand, you can make a really niche rule, like, look, the next time I see an Ana and she still has nade and sleep, I'm probably not going to dash in. That's a good rule because it's a small enough rule that you're probably going to remember it, but it also doesn't apply to too many scenarios that it's actually going to decrease your improvement. And but the thing you don't want to do is make a broad rule that's really, really easy to apply, but actually isn't the right answer in most of the cases that you're applying it to. I'm a firm believer that if you want to be a high-level player, you need to treat yourself like a high-level player. And that means you're not going to give yourself this small little, 3-step mental checklist as if that's all you're going to be able to think about. Because if you're only thinking about 3 things and you expect that when you get to Grandmaster, you're only going to be thinking about 3 things, then you should just get used to staying in Plat. Because it takes a lot more than 3 things to be thinking about at a time to stay in Grandmaster and Top 500 and Master even. You've got to have the ability to think at multiple different levels all at the same time. And quite frankly, I think that coaches like Awkward are treating these players as if they have no capability to handle all of the nuance and challenges that occur. So coaches actually fall in 2 different categories, I feel like. So let me get into that. First of all, there's the type of coach like Awkward where it's too simplistic and they apply too many rules with many exceptions, and that's just a crap mental model. It's like a decision tree if you've ever seen like a flow chart where you start here. Does the enemy team have an Ana? Yes. Then if the enemy team has an Ana, I can't dash in, and then that's your mental model. Maybe that's too simplistic. Or you've got 100 different options. Does the enemy team have an Ana? Can I dash in? Yes, I can dash in only if Ana doesn't have sleep. But I'm not allowed to dash in if Ana doesn't have sleep if she's in Kitsune Rush because she probably has sleep, again, because of the cooldown reduction. It's just like you create this decision tree, and that is just too complex. If it's either too complex or it's too simplistic. But with that type of mental model, it's just not going to work for a complex game like Overwatch. And then you've got the second type of coach, which we've all seen a ton of, and that's Spylo's archetype, where he's all about the nuance. And Spylo honestly has it a lot closer to correct, it's just not helpful. Spylo really emphasizes that, well, the answer depends. And that's true, the answer does depend, but that doesn't help you as a player figure out, like, what am I supposed to do if the answer is really complicated. Because what Spylo will do in his coaching sessions is often something that's helpful analytically, which is you'll just look at a VOD and determine what should we have done in that particular VOD, which is kind of helpful, but it's like going through one possibility out of a billion different combinations of things that could happen. And now how are you supposed to take the learnings from that VOD and apply it to the billions of different combinations of outcomes that you're going to have in your next game? It's just it's another scenario where it's like you get 1 grain of rice as your food for the day. It's just not going to help players to really improve. So I think there is a solution, and I'll get that in a second. But first, there's 2 things that Apply is actually wrong about. The first is that live coaching is actually good. He says he doesn't like live coaching because it changes the way that a player actually plays. And that's true. Live coaching does change the way that a player plays. But live coaching can be really, really good. Most importantly, what I'll say about live coaching is that it actually is it is more helpful for the coach and for the player to see the value of a coach than it really is for the player, because you're going to see improvement in a live coaching session with a skilled coach. That's just going to happen. If you think about it, like if you and the best player in the world both had the same screen and the same sound cues, but the best player in the world was able to think about the game without executing any of the mechanical skills. And they're going to tell you what you should do next while they're ult tracking, they're listening to sound cues, they're keeping track of how many cooldowns the enemy tank has. Of course you would do better. At least you should darn well hope that you're going to do better under those circumstances, because you have somebody who's effectively operating as a co-pilot and a really, really skilled one. So that's a good opportunity to check if someone is a live coach and they're not able to make you do better than you do on your own. If they can't coach you to win a game live in real time, then they are not as skilled of a coach as they want you to think they are. Because especially at the plat and diamond level, this should be something that you can do if you have the right streaming setup, you've got low latency, and you've got all of that sorted out. So that's the first thing that Apply is wrong about. The second thing that he's wrong about, and these are definitely nitpicks because on the whole I think he was right in his review, but the second thing that he got wrong is that cover fire is absolutely a thing in Overwatch. He sort of mentioned it in passing that cover fire is not necessarily a common thing in Overwatch, but that's not really correct. And especially on console Overwatch, but in both forms of Overwatch, you're gonna have cover fire, and this applies to hit scans and regular heroes in kind of the reverse way. If you've got a projectile hero, you're going to use cover fire just as much as you would as a projectile hero, but you're going to use it in different scenarios. So as a projectile hero, a lot of times when you do cover fire, it's when you're low HP and you're retreating around a corner. I'll say that again. As a projectile hero, think Lifeweaver, you're going to use cover fire as you're retreating around a corner. So somebody's chasing you and you're going to be shooting at them before you can even see them. Like they're not even there, but you know where they would be coming from if they were chasing you. So you're going to leave a trail of projectiles to make sure that they do get hit if they do choose to chase you. That's how you'll use it in general as a projectile hero. As a hit scan, you do the exact same thing, but when you're trying to confirm a kill or when you're trying to win a duel where you have lower HP than your target. So here's an example where I use cover fire despite the fact that we can see the enemy soldier, the replay viewer, really, really well. But at the time, I had no information except what I saw on my screen, which is that the soldier is now behind cover, and I know that if he peeks, I'm going to be shooting at the exact place where he will peek. And you might think, well, you're wasting ammo, and you can see that I don't actually get the kill confirmation there at all. And then I'll just move on and keep playing the rest of the game. But why would I have spent those bullets there to potentially confirm that kill if the soldier ends up never actually peeking? And now I'm just, I have 10 bullets instead of 30. Well, the answer is because my other option is to do nothing. I know that we're going to new point here. I see my Doomfist there. So I have all the time in the world to reload right here. I just knew that in that moment, the soldier had to choose. Either he's going to peek and die, or he's going to, or try to get a kill and trade out, or he's going to back out. And I knew that in the scenario where he peeks, I knew exactly where he's going to be peeking from. It's right on that corner where he ducked behind. So that's one of the many scenarios where you'll actually use cover fire. This happens in corridors, and I don't want you to think that just because Apply said you don't use cover fire, that it's never okay to pre-fire, because oftentimes you can, but you have to do that risk assessment of, do I need these bullets for something else, or do I have plenty of time to reload? So that's just one nitpick, but I think it's a practical tip that will actually help you improve. So lastly, I think real quality coaching could use two things. Number one, it would teach esports athletes what the known rules are and why. So for example, there's really no playbook out there that tells you what tanks are viable on Watchpoint Gibraltar. Spylo has done his best to show what tanks do well in certain matchups and certain maps, but even that is nowhere close to exhaustive. And there's sort of a cheat sheet or a mental model that most top level players follow, but nobody really writes that down in a way that's easy enough to memorize for players. So I think that's something that could be provided by top level coaches. And the second thing is ways to improve your neural processes. And this is really, really important. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when somebody goes to a coach hoping to get better, they're not paying $50 for a coaching session and saying, hey, can you get me from Diamond to Grandmaster? They're not expecting that overnight, literally after their coaching session. but they are hoping that that coaching session improves them to where they are going to start to climb more without having to spend thousands and thousands of extra hours in a game. Because ultimately, if your choice is spend 2K more hours in the game or get a coaching session, why would you ever pick the coaching session unless you think it's going to be more return on investment than just playing the game more? Because it's kind of a guaranteed, at least for most people, that if you play thousands of hours more, you're going to get better at the game, especially if you're playing comp and thinking analytically about it. But the thing about improving your neural processes is when you die, that downtime is something that can be utilized effectively. But coaches aren't emphasizing tips and tricks that actually improve your mental processes much. Like, for example, when you're in spawn, you can ask yourself, was there any other information on my screen that I missed? And this is one that I don't see mentioned often. People talk about ult tracking, they talk about cooldown tracking, but nobody talks about how when you're sitting in spawn, the best thing you can do is think about, just recall, what did I miss? And that's going to drive improvement because it's feeding your subconscious more information that otherwise you're just going to be mindlessly pressing tab and thinking about, oh, do I have more damage than enemy DPS? And if I don't, do my healers have more heals than the enemy healers? In which case, it's a heal diff. And you're just wasting this mental energy trying to find someone to blame for why this game isn't going that well and you're sitting in spawn. When instead you can really maximize the improvement that you're going to see by keeping positive mental energy and, more importantly, by keeping effective mental application and doing things like thinking about what information did you see or miss. And there's all sorts of tips and tricks like that that can really help to win fights. If that's the kind of stuff that you want to see, make sure you subscribe and you can get it as soon as it comes out.